One of the things that we must talk about now, and we're going to talk about it with Dr. Alan Mendoza from Henry Jackson Society, is the terrible attack that happened last night in Vienna. Around about 8 o'clock at night it started, and there's some chilling audio, which I'm not going to play you actually because it's quite upsetting, of how guns are being fired, automatic rifles are going off, and you can hear people screaming, you can hear repeated shots being fired. It really is pretty awful. Let's find out from Dr. Alan Mendoza what he's hearing from that part of the world. Alan, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for coming on. Shocking attack, it would seem, but sort of coming on the heels of what's been going on in France over the course of the last week or two, and also another attack on the French embassy in Saudi Arabia. There's clearly something going on here, isn't there?
Yes, I mean, I think we are seeing a resumption of a threat that never went away, really, Mike, but just went quiet for a bit. So that was, of course, the radical Islam terrorist threat. And as you've seen, a number of different incidents in the last week or two. And the reality is that our security services have constantly warned us about the nature of this threat. They've told us it remains, in many countries, the largest threat, although there is also a threat from other sources as well. And unfortunately, the bomber or the attacker only has to get through once, as sadly we've seen again last night.
Well, of course. The worry, though, it seems to me to be that there's a lot of links to people arriving in Europe relatively recently from perhaps Tunisia, from parts of North Africa, coming into Europe for this specific purpose. And I think that's what most people are more concerned about.
Yeah, I think obviously you've got questions about how migration policy is working, how borders are being protected, why people are being let in who, shouldn't be here. They're not, sort of here for political asylum purposes. They're here, on the surface, it would appear for economic migration reasons, but they turn out to also be terrorists. So there is a huge concern, as you've just highlighted, about what is going on with Europe's borders and who is being allowed in and what they are doing once they come in, of course, as well, and how monitoring is not working.
Well, that's right, because not least of our concerns is the numbers of people who have come to this country over the course of this year. We think estimates are ranging from sort of 5,000 to 6,000 alone, just coming on dinghies across the Channel. It may well be that the huge bulk of those people are entirely peace-loving and want to just start a new life in a place which is safe from them dying. However, you can't discount the fact that some of them might be similar to these people in Vienna.
Yes, and the worst part about this, of course, is that we don't really know who is coming in. When you get boatloads of people coming in trying to sneak in, you don't undergo the rigorous checks you would normally do in a migration process as to working out who the migrants are. And given that we already know we have a security services problem in terms of monitoring extremism in this country, any extra importation of extremism is going to stretch our forces even further.
Yes, exactly right. And as far as this particular attack is concerned, Alan, what do we know so far? Because it's very patchy in terms of the sort of the facts coming out of Vienna. At one point last night there was a thought that there were some hostages being held. It's not that clear whether the gunmen were in that street because they wanted to attack the synagogue, which was closed. It's not that clear whether all of them have in fact been apprehended.
Yes, it's very hazy. And even today, even this morning, although the Austrian authorities have been confident, of course, to say this was an Islamist terrorist attack, and they've been able to sadly identify that 3 people have lost their lives, and that an attacker, and many others have been injured, attackers have been killed, but it appears there are others still on the loose from what they are saying. And so we don't have a clear view yet of what the specific motivation was. We know it was ISIS related from what the Austrians have told us. We don't know whether this was planned a long time in advance, whether it was a cell, how this operated. And I think those facts are going to take some time to come out, given the patchy information we've received thus far, which indicates the authorities aren't quite certain themselves of what yet is going on.
No, it's very, very worrying. And as far as the Austrian sort of situation overall is concerned, I mean, they haven't really had too much problem with this in recent memory, have they?
Well, as with all countries, Austria has had extremism issues. It's true they haven't had a kind of a mass atrocity like this, the sort of assault that at one stage looked like it could have been like a Bataclan or a Mumbai style assault on their streets. But there have been numerous warnings by their security services about far-right extremism, by radical Muslim extremism, and the sad truth is, in today's Europe, none of us, it appears, are immune from this curse.
No, indeed. And as somebody pointed out last night on Twitter, how awful is it that Jewish people are being told to hide inside their homes in the centre of Vienna?
Well, it's all very reminiscent of of the 1930s in terms of being a Jew on continental Europe once again. If you're forced to hide your identity, what does that say about us as free societies? What does that say about us as liberal democracies that we cannot protect people? It's a terrible stain on our own democracy and public service. And people have been going on in recent weeks about, say, the threat to democracy from people like Donald Trump. We've got our own problems here in Europe, and it's not Donald Trump causing them. It is our failure to combat extremism within our societies.
Quite. And one of the things that people always raise about mainland Europe is it's much easier to get hold of guns there because an awful lot of military sort of hardware came across Europe from the Eastern Bloc and also continued to come through the Balkans War and all that kind of thing. I presume it's still relatively easy to move weapons through borders which are not really checked. Whereas in this country, hopefully, there's less chance of that.
Mike, thank God we're an island, let's put it that way, because as you've just identified, the ways to get into the UK and the ways to bring arms into the UK are far more limited than you have in continental Europe. And you're quite correct to state that the arms trade stemmed from the fall of the Soviet Union beyond the Balkan Wars. It is much easier to get weapons across, A, because the land borders are more porous, B, because in many cases, until fairly recently, there haven't been checks because of the Schengen zone. So you can transport weapons back and forth quite easily. And thankfully, we don't have that problem in the sense that as an island we are able to police our borders and you just can't bring a gun in just like that.
I mean, unusually, I think I'm right in saying, nobody's actually claimed this yet, have they? We haven't heard from any organisation saying that they did it. Is that unusual?
It is unusual, but it probably reflects, frankly, firstly, that ISIS is in a much weakened form from what it was. I mean, it's been essentially defeated on land. Its leadership structure has been turned over. This assailant appears to have been an ISIS sympathizer, from what we're hearing from the Austrians, but it's true they haven't claimed it formally, and I suspect that reflects either that it was handled locally, it came out of the blue, or that ISIS just is not organised enough to sort of do the sorts of things they were doing even as little as 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'm reading the latest reports here that the gunman who killed 4 and wounded 17 was apparently released early from prison on terror charges because he was too young to be kept in jail. 20-year-old Kujtim Fedzulai was jailed in April 2019 because he wanted to travel to Syria. So the suggestion, I suppose, being that he was an Austrian citizen.
Yes, that's an interesting point. If that's the case, and indeed his youth allowing him to sort of leave prison early.
Yeah.
But then again, we've got the next question we have to ask is, why was he not being monitored? If he was nonetheless a danger, he may not have been able to be kept in prison. What was going on in terms of Austrian intelligence monitoring? Have they dropped the ball here?
Well, this is again the same sort of question that's always raised, that there's only so much monitoring they can really do, and if you've got so many suspects who are being released out onto the streets, it's very difficult. Maybe it'd be a better idea not to release them.
Well, that's why, of course, we had a campaign here, as you know, to end automatic release so early halfway in sentences for people guilty of the most serious crimes like terrorism. As a result, we've increased the limits here to 2/3 of their sentence at least. And I think other countries are going to have to look very carefully and make the assessment that terrorism is not like other crimes. It's an ideological crime. It's not conducted out of a moment of anger. It's planned. There is a reason why people are doing it. And in many cases, sadly, they are not de-radicalized in prison and come out believing the same or worse at the other end.
No, quite right. Dr. Alan Mendoza, thank you very much indeed, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, on the terrible attack that was made in Vienna last night. It turns out that the boy, well, he's not really a boy, he's a young man who did most of the shooting, is aged 20, killed 4 people, wounded 17. It's not clear how many other people were involved. He was wearing a dummy explosive belt. He seems to have been shot dead now, but there's a big manhunt going on for at least one other attacker who might be on the run. And this guy apparently originated from Albania, which is one of the countries which, of course, does export an awful lot of people through asylum-seeking programs to all sorts of countries in Europe. And these are the kinds of issues that will have to be tackled by any government, regardless of what's going on under lockdown. It seems to me that there has been something going on in Europe, in France and now in Austria over the past few weeks, which is a very, very dangerous development indeed. And here we are in the UK not knowing really whether we're going to be next. And that is the problem, surely.